Om Shanti. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to another Yoga Small Talk, and we continue with 7 minutes Bhagavad Gita a day. And we are still reading verse 40, which is a very, very central teaching about Karma Yoga, the path of action. In this, there is no loss of effort, nor is there any harm, production of contrary results or transgression. Even a little of this knowledge, even a little practice of this yoga protects one from great fear. So, when we see this in the context of the 4 paths of yoga, we said the yoga of action, Karma Yoga, the yoga of devotion, Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of meditation, Raja Yoga, and the yoga of wisdom, Jnana Yoga. We can say the following. When we practice Bhakti Yoga, there is this risk of us growing fanatical. We can start thinking, my God, your God, because, for Bhakti we need to have a personal relationship with the divine in a form. And then someone else has a personal relationship with the divine, but in another form. So I'm starting to think, my God is better. His God is not as good as mine. I need to correct his way. And this is how fanaticism starts. So there is this risk of fanaticism in Bhakti Yoga. In Raja Yoga, we start working with the mind, and we see in the Raja Yoga Sutras of Patanjali that one of the things that happen to us on the way is that we start experiencing something that is called superpowers, siddhis. So we start having those attainments relating to our ability to work with the body and the mind. And we get very, very attached to them. And we start thinking, I am so great. I am so capable. I can work miracles. But the moment that we think, I am, we lost the point, because the point of yoga is union between myself and the Supreme, where the I am is no longer separate from the Supreme, and we see the Supreme in the entire creation. So when we go through this stage of siddhis, we can have a huge downfall. Moreover, some people approach the path of Raja Yoga with the desire to gain those siddhis. Now, sometimes for good intentions, they can say, this knowledge can be of great service to humanity. Right now, I can only serve to some extent. I can do good only to some extent because I'm very limited with my physical and mental capacities. But if I gain those siddhis, I can do so much better service. So we have this notion that we are doing this for the greater benefit of the world, but then when we get even a little taste of a siddhi, the ego starts rearing its head and there is a downfall. Now, with Jnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom, there are 2 main risks. One is that we will become very arrogant, because we become very knowledgeable. We learn a lot of scriptures, we learn how to debate the scriptures, we learn how to present a point. We go through a lot of in-depth knowledge, and we can develop this intellectual ego, I'm so smart. No one else can teach like me, no one else can rationalize like me. I know by heart so many verses of so many scriptures and in Sanskrit, etc. So I become infatuated with intellectual ego and arrogance. Arrogance is a very, very, very big obstacle on the path of a yogi, because basically instead of feeding yoga, we are feeding the ego, which takes us away from yoga. And the other thing is, as we said in previous talks, when we go to the direction of reducing our actions, sometimes we just stop doing things that we need to do and not doing other things because we are not really ready for Jnana Yoga. So we become non-functional members of society. Swami Shivananda, for instance, warns us against beggar mentality, people who renounce but then become very dependent on begging, and people who renounce but are not really doing the practices. They are just not doing anything and expecting society to serve them. So they are not contributing anything to society because they are not increasing the knowledge, they are not increasing the purity, but they are taking. So that's another risk. So in this context, in the context of the 4 yogas, the path of karma yoga, when we continue to do, where we continue to act, but we change our mental attitude and we purify through the process, is the least dangerous, because we'll always end up doing good. So there is no harm. But as we do it, we get away more and more and more and more away from my ego. And when I get more and more and more and more away from my ego, I become less and less and less scared, less and less and less sensitive to all the pairs of opposites. And eventually, through this, the verse tells us specifically, even a little bit of this knowledge, even a little practice of this yoga protects one from great fear, and Swami Shivananda clarifies the fear is the fear of being caught in the wheel of birth and death, meaning through this yoga we can transcend the fear of death. Now this is not to mean that we start to underestimate the value of life or the sanctity of life, but we start seeing things in perspective, and we are no longer motivated by fear. We are motivated by a sincere desire to use this body to the fullest extent, to the best extent, to be of service to others and to myself. So this is the teaching, and next verses will show us how to do the practices and to change our mental attitude. Om Shanti.